For the last decade, I've been building my real estate portfolio. It's worth millions of dollars, but I didn't start there. I started at the bottom, renting out my spare bedroom for $35 a night. And now I'm investing in boutique hotels. Along the way, I made a ton of mistakes, but I figured out exactly what separates the people that are successful and those that stay stuck. And in this video today, I'm gonna share all the lessons that I've learned on the journey along the way to building this portfolio so that you don't have to make the same mistakes that I did and you can actually apply the strategies that work. So this story starts way back when I was a kid. And growing up in a middle-class household, two parents who worked their corporate jobs, commuted to work every single day, and I was taught to go to school, get good grades, play sports, go to college, get a degree, get a job, and work at that job for 40 years until you retire. Don't forget to contribute to that 401k, put all your money in savings, save half of your paycheck, and that was it. There was nobody in my family that invested in real estate, owned businesses, or entrepreneurs. I didn't have any influences around me that told me any different than save money. My parents even paid off their mortgage on the house that I grew up in 15 years early. I remember them celebrating that day, and I think I was 15 years old, and I didn't really understand what it meant. I remember feeling like cool, but I also know that we don't turn the air conditioner on in the summer in California, and it's really uncomfortable. I remember feeling like there was a disconnect between how hard my parents were working and how much money we were actually keeping or using for fun. Growing up, we didn't go on a lot of vacations. We didn't take road trips. If we were taking a vacation, it was to go visit family for a family reunion, or we would drive from California to Washington State in one day to go visit with family. I remember sitting in the back of the car with my brother, squished in the seats, completely uncomfortable, dreading road trips. It was the last thing that I wanted to do, and it wasn't any fun. I mentioned not running the air conditioning in summer in California, and that's just one thing that showed me how not to spend money. That was the mindset of focus on saving money, saving pennies. Don't spend anything on yourself for enjoyment. It's not worth it. You're not worth spending money on yourself to be comfortable or to have joy or to have fun. You must save money at all costs. Nothing against my parents. This is how they grew up. This is how they were raised. This is how they thought, and it worked. They've saved a lot of money. They have a lot of cash in their retirement. They're doing very well. They just didn't prioritize spending on themselves. To say that we didn't take road trips is unfair. We did go to Six Flags. We did go to Yosemite. We did drive to see family. We did take road trips. But that was about once a year, maybe twice a year. The rest of the time, I was at school, doing homework, playing sports, studying, everything around the focus of going to college and getting good grades and ultimately getting a good career. So the lesson in this story that I'm telling you is you are not your family. You are not your environment. Your environment does impact you. I have had to unwind and rewire my brain to not think in this scarcity mindset of save, save, save. I'm the only person in my family that has built a real estate portfolio. I'm the only person in my family that has gone and built businesses. It's taken work, but I want you to know that you are not your family. You are not who you surround yourself by. If you stay in those environments, if you stay around those people, if you don't do the work on yourself, it will impact you, it will affect you. But just because you grew up one way does not mean that you have to be that way. Now I'm in college. Now I got my engineering degree. Now I got my corporate career. And the interesting thing about getting my engineering career is it was during '08, which is the real estate crash, and I was gonna take a break to go have fun. I was gonna go take a break to go have a gap year. I had heard that Europeans do gap years. And so I was gonna go do my own gap year. And so I moved from California up to Washington, where my family's from originally. I was just gonna work part-time, and then I was gonna figure out how to go travel. Because I hadn't done much travel as a kid, I was really itching to go do a lot of travel. But then the '08 financial crisis. I remember watching TV and seeing the news that the stock market was crashing, real estate was crashing. I didn't understand it at the time, but what I did know is I better go get a job. I have a degree. They're saying there's not gonna be any jobs. I need to go get a job. And so luckily, I was able to go get an engineering job. And one of the things that I wanted the most was to be able to go build and learn and grow. I didn't know at the time how much I valued those things, but I was really fortunate to get the job that I did. And so I got the job with a power company. It was the largest power company in Washington State. And I started at this little office out in the field working with linemen, working with people that worked with their hands and were building things. And there was a shop, and I was out in the field, and I was driving all over the state. I was learning so much. I didn't even know what it was that I was doing, even as an engineer. And so I'm so grateful that I was able to do that. And the interesting thing about me is my time as an engineer, people told me, Kassidy, you're a weird engineer. You like to talk to people. And that actually helped me in my career as I moved up because I started doing different engineering and I started leading projects. I got to work on some incredible projects. I was like a 23, 24-year-old kid managing like $50 million budgets for these massive power projects. I don't know why they had so much trust in me, but they did. And I got to create some really incredible things. And I discovered how much I love building big things. I still drive by my projects that I built that are on the side of the road. I know the names. I know the stories. I know who helped me. I know how much it cost. I know the weird stories about all the things that happened on those projects. And what I kept doing was I kept raising my hand at work. I kept raising my hand. Because my mentality back then was, I'm going to run the company. I had a desire to be great. I had an innate desire to climb the ladder. I wanted to go build more. I wanted to help people build more. I wanted to go build big things and have a big impact. This company had like over 2 million customers. I wanted to have an impact where I could help all of those people, provide better service, provide better technology, provide better substations, provide better power, right? This was an innate desire in me. And so I kept climbing the ladder. And I was so hungry to grow. Going back to my childhood, the other thing that was instilled in me is a work ethic, right? When you're told to go to school, get good grades, do sports, go to college, get a job, what that's saying is work hard. I was great at working hard. I was a hard worker. I was smart. I could lead people, work long hours, figure out the solution. I was an incredible engineer. I made a lot of mistakes, but I was also an incredible employee. And an incredible employee usually gets rewarded because they're not valuing their time for themselves. I was valuing my performance at work over my own health. And I was valuing my performance at work over my own desires, over my own life. I worked for the power company, and my nickname with my friends and family was Kassidy, keep the power on Warren, because they knew that that was my thing. That was my identity. My identity had become my job. Everything about me was around the power company. That was my identity. And I also kept raising my hand, and I ended up working during storms. And storm season in Washington is from October to April. And about every other weekend, there's a major storm. And so I was in the office, working night shifts, and then working my 60 hours on top of that every other week. And I kept doing that and kept doing that. And I did that for years and years and years. And eventually I worked my way up to where I was in the rooms with executives and leadership. And that's when things started to change for me. Two things started happening. I started getting really burned out, and I saw how decisions were being made. I was being passed over for promotions, even though I was working really hard, and I was losing my health. I was drinking too much, and I was working too hard. And so that culminated in my decision to quit my corporate career. My decision to quit my corporate career came down to the fact that I didn't have any time to dream. I didn't have any time to even think about what I wanted to do next. Because I had raised my hand so much, and because I had dedicated so much time and energy and effort and taken on so much of my job, I was sacrificing my dreams. I was sacrificing my life. And I didn't have any energy left to pour into my own health, into my relationship with my wife, into building anything for myself. I wasn't having fun anymore. I wasn't going outdoors anymore. I had lost the love for travel. I had lost the love for being outside. I had lost the love for my relationship. I was depressed. I was out of it. I wasn't myself. And it's because, and this is the lesson here, you need to do things for yourself. The more you say yes to other people, the less you say yes to yourself. A no to someone else is a yes to yourself. A yes to someone else is a no to yourself. And so I kept saying yes. And you should do this in the beginning. And then when you decide what you want and what's right for you, you say no. And the more you say no is when you start to really build. And that's when you become fulfilled. And that's when you work on the thing that you want, is when you can start saying no to everybody else. The other lesson here is when you're in corporate, you're building for somebody else. You're not building for yourself. There's usually no equity. The upside is all for the company. The security is somewhat false because you can be let go at any time, realistically. And even though I created a niche, and even though I dedicated my entire life to that company, I still continued to be passed over for promotions. I still continued to not make it to the next level. And I saw the politics that were going to prevent me from getting to the next level. And so ultimately that was the best decision because that's when I decided to quit. But I want to backtrack a little bit because we actually started our real estate journey a few years before I quit my job. We had bought our condo, the house that we lived in. It was a condo in Kirkland, Washington. If you know Kirkland, everybody knows it for Costco. But if you know Kirkland, Washington, it's a great little beach town. Google is there. And I saw Google expanding. I saw that they were taking their campus and they were building an addition onto the campus. And I remember what had happened in San Francisco with the expansion of Palo Alto and Silicon Valley. And I looked at my wife and I said, we have to buy something in Kirkland. Otherwise, we're going to be priced out. Because remember, I was working for the power company and my salary was not paying enough for me to be able to afford to live in Kirkland, especially today. And so we went on the hunt for a condo and we found one. And that's when we started our real estate journey as we bought our primary residence. Now, this is not what I recommend for everybody, but it's what we did. And then over the years, we made improvements. We renovated the kitchen. We renovated our primary suite. We replaced the floors. We did a lot of DIY. We put a lot of sweat equity. So on top of the corporate burnout, we were also doing home projects. And then our true real estate journey, when we became investors, but when we started making money, is when we started renting our spare bedroom out for $35 a night. And I was scared to do that. I was not ready to do that. My wife was all in. And the way that it happened is we went up to Vancouver, BC, which is just a couple hours from Seattle. There was a concert. It was The Weeknd. Love The Weeknd. Favorite artist, has to be. He was doing an outdoor concert. And it was not in Vancouver. It was a couple cities over from Vancouver in Surrey. And there was no real hotels. Or the hotel options were not that great. So we started looking at Airbnbs. We had never stayed in an Airbnb before. This is 2015. And so we tried to book an Airbnb and we got denied. If you remember back in the day, everyone had to approve. They could very easily deny you. If they didn't like you, if you hadn't stayed there, for whatever reason, they could decline you. And so my wife got declined and she was kind of pissed. And I was like, oh yeah, that's right. You got to kind of like message them, let them know you're a good human being, let them know you're going to take care of their property, all that stuff. And so we did that and they accepted us. And then we show up and I'm a little bit upset. I'm a little bit disappointed. I didn't realize we were staying with the hosts. I thought we were going to have this property all to ourselves. I didn't realize they were there. I was being a little bit of a Debbie Downer. Turns out the hosts, Terry and Selena, they were incredible people. They had been doing the Airbnb thing for a couple years. We got to know them really, really well. They ended up going to the concert with us because it was right across the street from their Airbnb. And they told us their dream of being able to buy a place in Belize using their Airbnb money. And then we also, because we had been sort of thinking about renting our spare bedroom out, but we didn't know, we asked them, hey, what do we do? And Terry and Selena spent hours telling us exactly what we needed to do to get extra sheets. This is how you screen guests. This is how you set up messaging, pricing. They basically gave us a masterclass in how to run an Airbnb. That one encounter was what gave us the confidence to go list the property. Now I say us, but really what happened is that next week, I got a text from my wife that said, we did it. I said, we did what? And she said, we're live. And she sent me the listing through text. I was at work and my heart sunk. I was so nervous. I don't know why I was so nervous. I think because looking back, it was a spare bedroom. The photos were not great. Like today, you would not book our spare bedroom. It was like a little dresser. I'll flash up the pictures on here, but it was not a great place. The photos were not great. We shared a bathroom, right? We only had one bathroom in the condo at the time. And so I was just really nervous that we weren't going to like do a good job for people. But that meeting with Terry and Selena, within a week, we went live. And that day, we got 3 bookings that day. And from that day forward, we were 70 to 90% booked. So we were always being booked. And my wife and I were coming back from our lunch break to go flip the room. We were cleaning, we were messaging guests. We were doing all the work ourselves. But what that did is that taught us every single thing that we needed to know about running an Airbnb, whether it was a spare bedroom, whether it was a whole house, whether it was a hotel. We essentially now knew hospitality. We knew how to run Airbnb. We knew how to screen guests. We knew what amenities they wanted. We knew how to communicate with them. We had every tool available to us to now go run our own Airbnbs. But this is 2015, still working corporate, hadn't left our jobs yet. The lesson here is just start. You will never be ready. You will never have all the information. You will never feel like it's the perfect time. You will never not be nervous. The more you wait, the more nervous you'll get. The more you wait, the less likely it is that you'll do it. But if you just start, then you can start making changes. You can start making adjustments. You can figure it out. Defaulting to action is what will get you what you need. The great thing about renting our spare bedroom was that we got to meet so many incredible people. I remember one of the people that we met was an investigator of poachers. She was one of 3 people in the world that traveled all over. When animals got poached, she would do the investigation. We met some professional golfers. It was pretty incredible who would book our place because the proximity and the pricing and the type of person that's willing to stay in a spare bedroom is also someone that likes to have conversations and likes to get to know people. And so usually by the 3rd night of someone staying with us, we were all buddies in the living room. We were having fun. Running our spare bedroom as a hotel made me fall in love with people and hospitality. I loved bringing people into our home. I loved learning about people. I loved sharing our space and sharing our city with people. I loved having people experience my city the way that I experience it. And that's something that I still bring with me to all of our properties and all of our hotels. I think the other lesson here is that it's okay to start small. And sometimes the first smaller step is the spare bedroom or the smaller house or partnering with someone. But once you have proof, you have proof and you have the confidence now to go bigger, right? So sometimes we have stuff that we can use and leverage in our existing world. Sometimes we have things that we can already leverage, right? We leveraged our spare bedroom. You might have spare bedrooms. You might have a basement. You might have an attic. You might have a guest house. You might have something that's already in your possession that you can turn into income. And so around this time, I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I had never read a book since college, I think. I have been in engineering textbooks. I've read prints and engineering documents and standards manuals, and I read all that stuff at work. But I hadn't read a book for myself in almost 10 years at this point. And so I decided to read Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I don't know what it was. I don't know why. But I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad. The thing I took away from Rich Dad, Poor Dad was I very much identified with the poor dad and that was my mentality and that's how I grew up. And it was safety, security, and the slow path to retirement. But the biggest takeaway was assets and liabilities. If you don't know what the difference between an asset and a liability is, let me tell you. A liability is something that costs you money. It's your car payment. You do not make money on your car. You spend money on your car. Usually, 99% of the time, a car is a liability. Credit card debt, liability. Ex-girlfriend, liability. Just kidding. Well, she might be a girlfriend, liability, unless she's making you money. Liabilities are things in your life that cost you money. And we're strictly talking about money. There's also liabilities that are energy related, right? People or things that suck your energy and don't give you energy, but assets and liabilities. This is when the light bulb clicked. So liabilities cost you money. Assets make you money. Assets are things that make you money. So your primary residence, our condo, our home that we lived in, that was a liability. We had expenses. We had a mortgage. It was not making us any money. We were spending a lot of money on renovations. Yes, it was growing in value, but it wasn't actually paying us every month until we rented the spare bedroom out. And then it became an asset. Then it became an asset because it allowed us to pay the majority of our mortgage and completely reduce our expenses. So your ability to take on new ideas that are outside of yourself and take ideas from people that have learned it and done it and implement them into your life, that is what is going to allow you to change. So that's the lesson here is read, feed your mind, and implement the things that are in alignment with your goals and your future. Take the lessons of others and go implement it in your life. And for Rich Dad, Poor Dad, assets versus liabilities. I remember when that clicked for me, I remember saying, I'm never going to buy anything that doesn't make me money ever again. Now, I did that for a long time, but that's not true anymore because that's not a joyful life, right? If you just only buy things that make you money, you're not buying things to create joy for yourself, like clothes. Like if you don't buy clothes for yourself because they don't make you money, that's not like you're not living a joyful life. But and we'll get to this, but the understanding of what an asset versus liability is really flipped a switch in my mind to wanting to go create wealth for myself. So then back to quitting the job. So I had spent about 10 years in corporate and I realized I had just spent a decade dedicating myself to someone else. And the other piece of this that I haven't talked about yet is my drinking. I was drinking every single night, bottle of wine every single night, more on the weekends. And if you've been following me at all, you know that I've been sober for over 7 years, but it was at my 10-year mark my corporate career is when my health started failing. I didn't know it at the time, but I had a blood disease and the drinking was making that worse. I was getting vertigo. I was having liver pain. I was having stomach pain. I was not working out. I was not building muscle. I felt like my vocabulary was declining. I was looking at myself in the mirror and I just looked gray. I looked like sad and like a ghost of my former self. And I'm just being honest with you because I know the nights being drunk and looking at myself in the mirror. And I know there's people out there that are doing the same because deep down inside, you know what you're doing is not in alignment with who you are and you're a better person. For some reason, you keep drinking. And this is for me. I would look at myself in the mirror, drunk, still drunk from the night before, going into work. And I could see my younger self. I could see myself. And I was telling myself, you're better than this. And so leading up to quitting my job, my wife and I were taking a van trip. It was during the time that van life was a big thing. And we had a pop-top van that we loved. Its name was Mochi. We documented some of that on Instagram. And I knew that if I was going to go be living in a van and not having any money, I couldn't keep drinking. You can't be driving a van and have liquor bottles and wine bottles rolling all over the place. You can't be spending money on booze every night. You can't be driving around trying to find a camping spot drunk. You can't get woken up by the cops because you're sleeping in the wrong spot and be drunk and then go drive. Like, practically speaking, I could not keep drinking and go live in a van. So lucky for me, there was some practicality to it. My scarcity mindset of like, we don't have any money, so I can't spend money on booze, that helped me decide to quit drinking. And so from the point that I quit drinking, I quit my job, lived in the van for 6 months. And the point of the van trip was for me and my wife to reconnect. Because if you've ever dedicated yourself to a career, you know that your wife and your family, they usually come second. At least that's how it used to be. And so if you're like me, you were so heads down, so gung-ho on the career, you got married young, you were not emotionally available, and you became someone that was so focused on his career and started drinking too much, not taking care of himself. And it created a relationship where there was no space and time for emotions and communication, even though you still really loved each other. And so the van trip was to reconnect, and it was to rekindle, and it was to find space for ourselves to figure out what we wanted to do next with our lives. And that's exactly what we did. Day one of the trip, after leaving my wife's family in Montana, and we're driving through Yellowstone, and I look at my wife and I say, what do you want to do with the rest of your life? And she says, I want to own a bunch of Airbnbs all over the country. And I said, great, me too. And that was it. Literally all we needed was no stress or pressure from our jobs and a few hours in the van together to look at each other in the eyes and say, this is what we want to do with our lives. And so the lesson here is you need space for yourself. You need space away from life. You need space away from work. You need space away from the things that are draining your energy. And I'm physically talking about creating space outside and away from everything. And I'm talking about creating space and time for yourself in your favorite spot on the couch or on a chair or in bed or at the spa or wherever you go or wherever you feel amazing, you need to create space for yourself. You need to sit with yourself. You need to put the phone down. You need to not be focused on others and only focus on yourself and create silence and peace. And I guarantee that inner voice, that inner knowing will come up and it'll tell you exactly what you need to hear. It'll tell you exactly what you need to know. And so that moment in the van so many years ago with my wife, all we needed was a little space to figure out what we were going to go focus on for the next 5 years. And that's when we started building wealth. That's when everything changed. And the funny thing about the van trip is that same day when we decided what we wanted to do, driving from one side of Yellowstone to the other, we ended up breaking down on the other side of Yellowstone. And it wasn't just a normal breakdown. We didn't know it at the time, but our entire engine needed to be replaced. And so the universe was saying, hey, you just decided what you wanted. So guess what? I'm going to show you every way that I can that you need to go and work on that. And so we spent the next 6 months repairing, replacing, maintaining, breaking down all over the US. We flew overseas for a couple months to take a break from the van and just enjoy life a little bit. But we broke down every other day in that van. We persisted and persisted and persisted. And what I took away from living in the van is I don't want to live like that. I want to travel. I love traveling, but I don't want to live in a van and break down and be dealing with batteries and oil and fluids. I want to be building something. I want to be enjoying life. I want to be creating something and I want to make money. I don't want to be eating rice and beans. I had saved up all this money. There was a stack of cash in the bank account from saving up for a year in the van, but I was too afraid to spend it because then I wouldn't have any more. So it was this weird backwards idea that I had. And I learned from the van that I don't want to live like that. I want to have an abundance. I want to have passive income. I want to have wealth. I want to have equity. I want to build things. I don't want to live like a nomad. I want to live in permanence. I want to live with decisiveness. And so we finally gave up on trying to make the van trip happen. We moved in with a friend in Seattle who was gracious enough to house us. Thank you, Adrian. And the day that we came back, I got a phone call from my old company. They had heard that I was in town and that I might not be doing the van trip anymore because we were sharing on social media. So people knew that we were back in town and we had given up. And I say given up, but we decided to stop. So I got a call and they said, hey, we're having trouble. Can you come back and help us fix this? And I said, yeah, I can come back as a consultant. I didn't want to come back as an employee. I knew I didn't want to come back as an employee. I knew I wanted to come back as a consultant, if anything, even if it was just temporary. And so I knew what the consultants made. And they offered me one rate and I countered with another because I knew what they paid consultants and I knew what I was worth. And so that started my consulting journey. So for all of you out there, the lesson here is like, pay attention to the universe. If you're paying attention to what the universe is telling you, you will see the path. You will see where you're supposed to go. You will have an innate knowing. So if I would have been paying attention to what the universe is telling me, when the van broke down, we would have flown to Thailand and Bali and we would have come back and we would have gotten back to work. But it took 6 months, but still the universe said, hey, here's a gift. You're going to start your own business out of happenstance. And I know that's not like this inspiring story of like, oh yeah, I had a purpose to start my own business. This is how I did it. It started with, I got a phone call. I got lucky. I negotiated my rate. And then I did all the steps that it takes to start a business. And I learned everything about S Corp and LLCs and master services agreement and contracts. I learned all that by starting it, even though it was just me and my wife. And that is when we really started investing in real estate. So I went back to work and my wife went back to work. We both started consulting. And so that meant we were making a lot of money. We were doing consulting rates, which are usually triple salary rates. And I had figured out how to save money on taxes so that we could use all that money into buying real estate. And so if you've been following me, you know this is what I tell people with regular jobs or consulting jobs or whatever. Go buy real estate to reduce your taxes. Take all your active income and go funnel it into real estate. Because what we did next was we bought 2 Airbnbs every year for the next 5 years. I think we made it up to 9 short-term rentals, 9 Airbnbs. And the way that we did that is we used all the money we were making in consulting. We used it to get loans on these properties. We did renovations and we ran them really, really well. There's two other ways that I did this though. Before I quit my job, I had a gut feeling that I should get a home equity line of credit. And so I did that beforehand. I did that before we quit, which meant that we had access to about $150,000 in equity that we could use as a line of credit to help us go buy these properties. And so those of you that are afraid of debt will say, hey, getting a line of credit, getting a HELOC, that's risky. You shouldn't do it. But we were able to buy 3 properties using that line of credit. And we did it strategically. 3 times we pulled chunks of money as down payments and closing costs on our first 3 properties. The second move that we did was, after quitting my job, I took my whole 401k and I moved it into a self-directed IRA. And that means that I had access to how I invested that and if I withdrew it. And so everyone's scared of withdrawing their 401k, but I bought 3 more properties with that 401k and I withdrew it in chunks. And so yes, I paid the penalty. I paid the 10% fee. So I had about $400,000 in that 401k. So over time, I spent $40,000 in fees, but I bought 3 properties with the 401k. So with the line of credit and the 401k, we bought 6 properties. And then we used the consulting income to fund all the renovations. The lesson here is if you don't take the risk, you'll never get the reward. We were so dialed and so focused on the goal. For 5 years, all we did was buy, rehab, rent, refinance, and repeat. We burred to maximize our cash flow and maximize our equity. We did things that normal people would find risky. You watching this might say, oh my gosh, that's pretty risky to put a HELOC and go cash out your 401k. But we believed in ourselves. And we had such a vision, such a goal. And we knew that we had other options if we needed to. And we believed in our skills. And we were good at what we did. And so if you don't take some level of risk, you're not going to get a reward. There's a reason that putting your money into the stock market or a mutual fund guarantees you a 3 to 7% return, because it's low risk. It's guaranteed because it's always sort of happened and you're not really risking your money. I don't have a lot of money invested in the stock market because I like to control how I invest my money. I like to put my money in real estate for lots of different reasons. But there's a reason that you get an average 3 to 7% return, because it's not that risky. Or at least you're not putting yourself out there. You're not creating anything. Let me say that. It's not about risk. It's about you creating something and creating value. We built a massive portfolio and a massive operations team. And by massive, I just mean there was a lot going on and we had team members. We had to learn how to hire. We had to learn how to pay people. We had to learn everything. And we were working our full-time jobs. So I went from being burned out, drinking too much, living in the van, being burned out, not drinking anymore, to working consulting, which was heavy hours and more pressure, starting that business, buying multiple short-term rentals, learning how to operate them, designing, managing contractors. Holy shit. I wouldn't do it exactly the same, but what I will tell you is it was worth it. I am so grateful and so thankful that I have that portfolio. I have that cash flow. I have that experience. I can now sit here today and talk to you and give you every little lesson, every little story. I can give you the best of the best and share with you so you don't have to get burned out, so you don't have to get stuck, so you don't have to feel that way. You have to do some level of risk. But it's not risk if you're creating something that's unique and authentic to you and you're trying to add value into people's lives. That's the lesson. Create value. Create value. The other thing that happened is we started getting some feedback about how crazy we were. We had to start dealing with other people's opinions. We had to start dealing with the public, our family, friends. The first house was mixed reviews because it was Cleveland. We bought our first house in Cleveland. It was a business decision. We had never been there, but we looked at what we thought we could afford versus the revenue that we could generate. And Cleveland was one of the top contenders. So we went out there. Actually, my wife went out there alone, looked at 20 properties. She found it. She bought it. She had contractors lined up ready to go the day that we closed. And I didn't come out until when we were setting it up. But everybody always asks, why Cleveland? And they give me that look. They give that look of like, I would never invest in Cleveland, but we knew what we were doing. And we knew that we could be the best in that market. And that's exactly what we did. And so we bought that house for $277,000. We generated anywhere between $65,000 to $80,000 of revenue, which netted us anywhere from $30,000 to $40,000 a year. We sold it for $475,000. So in total, over 5 years of owning that property in Cleveland, we made over $400,000. That's why Cleveland. That's why. Because we trusted ourselves. We created something. We added value. We loved our guests. We loved our neighbors. And the universe rewarded us with cash flow and equity and value. That's the way it works. I did want to mention one family member in particular that was a huge supporter. Her name is Kit. She helped raise me. She's been my biggest fan my entire life. And she could see what we were doing. She knew what we were doing. She could always see me. She could always see me. She always believed in me. And she supported me at every step along the way. She knew what we were doing and she supported it. And I encourage everybody to go find that person in their family and use them as your support. Allow yourself to open up to them. Allow yourself to be there with them. But without Kit, we wouldn't have had a safe haven after the van broke down for the last time. We were able to stay at her house for months and recover from the van trip and allow us to figure out what we were doing next. And so, Kit, I love you. You're my biggest fan and I'm your biggest fan too. So thank you. With each property that we bought bigger and bigger and did more and more renovations. So we were spending more money, we were buying bigger properties, we were doing bigger renovations because I had figured out the velocity of money strategy, right? Go look at some of my other videos, but essentially you buy in a great neighborhood, you make great renovations, create a great experience, and you're going to create a lot of cash flow and a lot of increased value. And the great thing was we were making more money than we ever had, but we were paying zero in taxes. And this is also part of my velocity of money strategy. But it's what I figured out that is a huge benefit for anyone that has a regular job. It's a huge benefit for anyone that has a regular job. And we kept doing it and kept doing it. We kept making more money, but buying bigger and bigger and bigger. And we got to the last project. It was Drachman, one of the ones I'm most proud of. Aaron and I worked on that together, created an incredible space, incredible design, some of the biggest renovations, some of the biggest headaches. And this was property number 9 in 5 years. And guess what? Burned out again. Guess what? Not taking care of the relationship again. Guess what? Not feeling fulfilled and satisfied again. And I wasn't drinking, but I was hitting tobacco pretty hard. I was vaping. I was smoking hookah quite a bit, because I thought hookah was better. I wasn't working out like I should. I wasn't taking care of myself. I didn't have good habits. I didn't have mentors. I didn't have coaches. I didn't have anybody but me and my wife. And we had spent 5 years side by side building this portfolio, spending all this time, all this money, all this energy. We had done it, but it didn't feel like we had done it because we were so burned out. We were so beat up and things were getting harder. The market was taking a dip. The bookings were pulling back and we were spending all this money on this project. And I felt like a failure because I felt like everything was going to implode and it was my fault because I'm the one making these decisions. I'm the head of household. I'm the man, right? And so I finally started going to therapy. And then I finally decided to look into getting mentors. And so I didn't know I was needing a mentor. But what happened was Dan Martell released his book, Buy Back Your Time. He started posting on social media, just like I'm doing now. He started sharing about his life. I remember the first reel that I started following Dan on was him telling the story about his fiance slamming the ring down on the counter because he was working too much and he wasn't being a good husband or being a good fiance. I started following him from that reel because I was feeling the same way. I was going through the same situation. I was not being a good husband. I was not being a good leader. I was not being a good head of household. And so I started following Dan. And then he had a hike in the city that he lives in, Kelowna, Canada. I lived in Seattle, not too far away. And he said, everybody's invited. And I messaged him. I said, everybody's invited? Because I want to come out there. And he said, yep, 6 a.m. sharp, we leave. And so on a whim, on a Sunday, I flew out there. I gave myself an extra day and a couple extra days on the back end. Dan's book was speaking to me. Dan's book described all my pain, all my suffering, all my strife, all on a page. And the reason I'm talking about this is because I want to help you avoid feeling the burnout, feeling the pain, feeling the struggle. You don't have to suffer through building your real estate portfolio or building a business. You don't have to suffer. It's going to be hard, but I want you to know that if you do the right things, it's going to be okay. And so Dan's book spoke to me because no one had described my pain in more detail than Dan had in that first chapter. So I flew out to Canada. He knew I was coming. I don't know if he would remember me. I was there. There was probably 40 people on the hike that day. It was June of 2023. Sorry, July 4th weekend. July 4th weekend, on July 4th, I was in Canada. And I found out later that I was the first person to ever fly to Kelowna to do the Founders Hike on a Tuesday. But Dan spent the majority of the hike with me. He helped me. He connected me with people. He was obviously the man of the hour. He was early Dan. He only had 50,000 followers at the time. And I got to meet him. And then I told him my story about being sober. And he asked if I wanted to come around. There was a couple other events he was hosting. And so Dan showed me how you can be inclusive, how you can help people. And then Dan opened up his coaching program a couple months later. And of course I was in. It was $8,000 at the time. That was the most money I'd ever spent on any coaching. And after that point, I've now spent over $150,000 on coaching, on mentorship, on self-improvement, because getting my first mentor in Dan was what changed my life. But Dan's not a real estate guy. And so I realized very quickly that I loved Dan's program and I needed it and I stayed in it, but I needed real estate. I knew boutique hotels were the next step. I didn't understand why, but now I understand why because of the way that leverage and forced appreciation work and evaluating properties based off the income that they make. Unlike our Airbnbs could generate $1 million a year, but the value of the property is not going to go up because of that. With a hotel, if I double the revenue, the value of that property is going to triple. And so I knew that I wanted to get into hotels. And I knew that because of the regulations and all these other pain points about Airbnbs and the scalability, that I needed someone to help me with hotels. And so then that's when I saw Rich Summers. And Rich had closed on his third hotel in like 18 months. And something that I learned about myself is that I look for the best. And this is what I want to tell you too. You should look for the best. You should want to be with the best. I think I'm one of the best in the world at this. But if there's someone that you think is better and more aligned with you, you should do that. But the more that you try to align with the best, and maybe this is a lesson for this, but the more that you try to align with the best, the more you're going to get out of it. Not just because of the information, because most of the information that I have or other people have is relatively the same. One of the benefits of being around the best is that they attract the best. And so Rich attracts the best. Dan attracts the best. And then I got another coach. I got a breathwork spiritual coach, Lucas Mack. He attracts the best. He's Jake Paul's spiritual coach, breathwork coach. Am I going to get a chance to go meet Jake Paul and have him on the podcast? Maybe. So I know I'm getting a little off track here. What I want to say is in the 2 years that I've spent that 150 grand on coaching and mentorship, that's when everything has changed. That's when I started sharing content. That's when I started coming out of my shell. That's when I started buying hotels. That's when things really started changing. I became unbroken. I had people, I had cheerleaders, I had support, I had a network. I wasn't a lone wolf anymore. And so the lesson here is proximity is power. Your proximity to greatness, your proximity to the best will elevate you to the best. You will be elevated and launched into your goals if you surround yourself with the best. And a lot of times we don't want to surround ourselves with the best because we're afraid that we will be great. We're afraid that we will be held to a higher standard. We're afraid that we will have to perform. But in reality, when we're around the best and we're well resourced and we're well supported, it's not as hard. We're not suffering. It's easier because we have the network, we have the people, we have the energy, we have the momentum. We're actually living our lives. We're living our dreams. And so the old me is scarce, money afraid, like don't spend a penny, save everything, grip onto everything, fight with contractors. I was getting so frustrated. I was so negative. I was such an annoying person to be around. I had all these properties. I had all this money and I was so annoying and frustrating to be around. And so I'm here because of my coaching and my mentorship to be a better person and to share all this with you. And that's something that I got from my mentors too, is sharing and adding value and doing it because you want to help people. I joined the Boutique Hotel Mastermind in March of 2024. I met everybody in person. I got real lucky. The universe has a way of like really playing in your favor when you go all in. I joined the mastermind. There was a retreat the next week in Mexico. I went there. I met everybody. There was an active deal going on. And so joining in March, I was closing on a hotel in April of 2024. So within 6 weeks, I had gone from joining the mastermind to owning a hotel. I raised money. I called my friends and family and said, hey, will you invest in this, right? I actually got over my fears of raising money. You know, you might be looking at me and being like, oh, Kassidy, you're confident. Da, da, da. I have a lot of fears. I have a lot of self-doubt. I have a lot of self-worth issues, especially around money. And so me going and asking people for money didn't feel great. But I believed in the hotel so much, and I believed in the team so much, and I believed in what I was doing so much. I wasn't taking money. I was creating opportunity for people. And so in 6 weeks, I joined a community and I owned a hotel. And I got to run the marketing and I got to learn operations and I partnered with people and I raised money and I understand syndications. And it gave me everything I needed. And then now I'm teaching in the community. I went from not knowing anything to teaching in the community. And now I've got my own community. Because I want you to be able to buy real estate. I want you to be able to create wealth for yourself. And I want you to buy the right kind of real estate. And so now what I'm doing with hotels is I'm working on creating what I want to build. I want to create art. I want to create incredible experiences. So the hotel that we bought in Solvang, California is a 24-unit boutique hotel. Absolutely gorgeous outside. Worked with a great team. Did a ton of renovations. Really proud of it. And I want to go build something that's completely in alignment with my heart. And so I love creating experiences. I love creating emotions and peace and joy for people. And I love creating integrated pieces in nature. And so I am working on building a portfolio of essentially art pieces and exceptional hotels that I want to build and create for people in exceptional locations. And so that's what I'm working on now. And the thing about hotels is you have so many more levers that you can pull to create wealth and to build cash flow and create experiences. If I were just buying multifamilies in the Midwest, I can't really do too much to make more money or to create more value for people. With hotels, you have an almost unlimited way of creating value for people in experiences, in amenities, in design, in renovations. You can let your imagination run wild with being able to create things for people to then go create value and go generate more revenue and add to your net worth. I see hotels and hospitality as a way to give back to people and give them rest and joy and peace and love. I see my ability to create an experience as a way of giving back to people so that they feel peace and love and joy in nature, in the environment, in their room. Connect with their spouses, connect with themselves, connect with nature. This is why I love hospitality. This is why I love hotels. This is why I love designing them for me, is because I want people to connect with themselves, connect with their spouses, connect with their families, and connect with nature in a way that they've never done before. You can do that with Airbnbs, but truly being able to design and create something like a hotel, you can create so much value and connection in people's lives. And that's why I do it. When you're learning about a new thing, you may not know exactly what direction you want to go. And like I did in my career at engineering, I raised my hand, raised my hand, raised my hand. So in my hotel journey, I raised my hand, raised my hand, raised my hand. And that's brought in a lot of people, a lot of relationships, a lot of opportunities, a lot of great things. What I've also learned is that now when I want to say, I want to go build this for myself, that's when the real fun starts. And so in your journey, it is worthwhile to go raise your hand and go learn things from other people, even if it's not the exact thing you want to build right away. Remember, I started with my spare bedroom for $35 a night. That's not the end game. And so now I'm working on the end game. I'm working on iconic properties. I'm working on art to go create in nature for myself and others. It's okay to raise your hand and learn things. But once you start aligning your purpose and your vision in what you create and you make it about others, that's when things start happening. That's when things start happening. I also think back to my younger self who didn't get to travel, who didn't take road trips, who didn't experience hotels. If we stayed anywhere, we stayed in Motel 6s, that sort of stuff. Economy lodges, which is fine, right? There's nothing wrong with that. But I didn't get to travel or have a ton of fun as a kid. And so in college, I traveled a ton. My wife and I, we traveled a ton. And I've been able to bring all of my travels, all of my experiences into these hotels, into these rooms, into these Airbnbs, into these experiences to create and evoke emotions in people that they haven't felt before. That's my goal. One of the biggest parts of my journey is the relationship with my wife, Erin. I've mentioned her throughout this. I've mentioned the troubles that we've had, the struggles that we have. And we've been open and public about this. She is the most ride or die, supportive, loving person I've ever had in my life. The amount of love and support I get from my wife is unmatched. And I would not be here talking to you, creating hotels, creating Airbnbs, doing any of this, having the confidence, having the ability to speak into this if it were not for my wife. There was a conversation that we had when I was deciding to go into hotels. And up until that point, it had been Erin and I. And we even had a little brand called Beard and Braid, right? Beard, and she had a braid. And I wanted to go invest in hotels. And so I had to have a conversation with her that was, I'm doing this. This is mine. This is for me. I'm going to do this no matter what. You can come along. You can be a part of it. But you need to find your place in this. It is not Kassidy and Erin do hotels together. It is Kassidy does hotels and Erin does hotels or design. You have a place, but you have to create that place for yourself. I'm going to go create my place. And I would really love your support, but also I'm going to do it no matter what. That was a really hard conversation, but it was one of the moments where our relationship became so much stronger. And I share this because we were in a bit of a codependent relationship. And I didn't realize that at the time. But by going off and me working on hotels and Erin working on herself and us basically separating our identities from the couple, the beard and braid, and creating our own identities as individuals, that has allowed us to become the strongest, best versions of ourselves and ultimately support each other like we've never been able to support each other before. And I want to share this stuff because in private, when I've shared other things about our relationship, people have come up to me and told me how much they appreciate it. And that tells me that a lot of people struggle in their marriages and their relationships. And I want to be a lighthouse. And I want to let you know that it's okay and it does get better and it's easier and you can get through the hard times. Your ability to support your spouse with unconditional love and support without sacrificing your own needs is true love, is ultimate love and support. Without my wife's support, I would not be here today. I know we all want to be self-made and we want to be self-fulfilling prophecies of our dreams, and that is possible, but also having the support of your spouse, really, it's like rocket fuel to the rocket ship. So the lesson here is, there's a couple lessons. The lesson here is, nobody has to change for you to win, right? My wife didn't have to do anything, and I was still going to go do this. So she didn't have to change for me to go win. But the unconditional love and support of your spouse is unmatched when you're chasing your dreams. It will put rocket fuel on the fire and you will launch into the stratosphere with the right spouse. Finding the right person to marry and be with is a hack to be fulfilled and supported and loved and successful. And so huge love and thanks to my wife. I started as a corporate engineer, working 60 hours a week, dedicating myself to be the best employee I could be. And then I decided to start doing things for myself. It started with trying to make a little bit more money by renting out my spare bedroom, $35 a night, starting very small, quitting my job, creating space, living in the van, quitting my vices, giving up drinking, giving up tobacco, no more weed, doing the things that are required to allow myself to be the best version of myself. And the moment that I started doing that is when the universe responded and I was able to go build a large real estate portfolio, be confident enough to go buy boutique hotels, be confident enough to now go create even better boutique hotels and more aligned hotels with my spirit and my heart. And now I'm sitting here sharing it with you. I've had coaches and mentors that have given so much to me, that have allowed me to change my life and become my most authentic self. And so now that's what I'm doing. I'm sending the ladder back down. I'm not the top real estate. I don't have hundreds of millions of dollars in real estate. But what I do have is I do have the knowledge and ability to help change your life, to help you become financially free, to live the life that you want to live, to help you think bigger, to help you buy the right type of real estate. And so this content is for younger Kassidy. This content is for everyone out there that resonates with this story. Me sharing all of this is in the hopes and desire that you resonate and you find something useful out of this, and you find some inspiration, and you share it with your loved ones, you share it with your siblings, you share it with your cousins. Anyone that's in the same position that wants to be free, I hope that you share this with them in the hopes that we can work together and I can help you become financially free. And it's not just about being financially free, it's about you achieving your dreams. Buying real estate is the escape velocity to get out of the trap and then go live your life. Do the things that you want to go do. The only way that you become wealthy is through owning real estate or owning a business. Fact. Unless you're a software engineer working at Netflix or Google or Facebook or Amazon, it's going to be really hard for you to get wealthy off of a salary. I can help you do that. The only way is to buy real estate or start a business. But I think for a lot of us, the thing that we want is to be able to go live the life that we want before it's too late. I was watching people at my corporate job retire after 40, 50 years, and then within weeks or months, they were dead or their spouses were dead. That happened so frequently. I could not believe how often people would retire and then they would die. I know that's a little bit morbid, but it was a motivator to not be like that. I did not want to live my life that way, and I know you don't want to live your life that way, and it's never too late. It's not too late to go live the life that you want. And so if you want to work together, if you want to have financial freedom, if you want to buy real estate, I can help you buy the best real estate. I can help you live the life that you want. There's a link in the description to go work together. I have a community called Escape Velocity. It does just this. It helps people escape the trap, create financial freedom, live the life that they want. And I hope that you enjoyed this today. This is my hope that putting my story out there resonates with people. And again, please share, please subscribe, please comment below, but link in the description to go work with me if you want to achieve financial freedom and live the life that you've always wanted to live. As always, I appreciate all of you. My name is Kassidy Warren. Peace.